Welcome back to the Batman Code. This second part of my exposition of The Dark Knight Rises, we're going to be examining what went wrong. There's a pretty strong consensus that this movie stumbled, but why? Here is the short answer. Pity to the paupers. The first half of the movie proceeds pretty well, as Collider pointed out, but the narrative falls apart in the second half. For example, what was the point of Gotham having a class war, and what was Bane's motivation? Roger Ebert echoes the same point. Bane is mystery because it's hard to say what motivates him. His goal seems to be the overthrow of the ruling classes, but this would prove little if his other plan, the nuclear annihilation of the city, succeeds. Precisely, what's Bane's motive? Bane is not the problem. He becomes fragmented because the storyline fragments. What went wrong? Specifically, what the Dickens went wrong. Bane and the storyline are fragmented because this movie is actually two different movies trying desperately to be harmonized, and they are working fundamentally with two utterly incongruent fundamental sources. The Batman Code has demonstrated that the two primary sources of this movie and the trilogy are The Republic and Paradise Lost. As this article in Telos points out, The Republic is the original tale of two cities, as Socrates states. Those cities are the rogues and the paupers. Your script authors want to weave the cultural and political sentiments of Charles Dickens, specifically his Tale of Two Cities, which is overwhelmingly pity to the paupers, the demos, the people, with the problems and issues of The Republic Book 8, which is overwhelmingly damning to the demos. This will send the narrative into a tailspin, but Charles Dickens' tale found its way into the Batman movie. Bane is knitting in the courtroom, and that's a reference to the Dickens novel. Shout out to Nerdy Facts again. And Gordon is reading from A Tale of Two Cities at Wayne's funeral. Jonathan Nolan openly said the novel had a major influence on the film. That's sufficient to confirm the connection. But moreover, a Dickens-esque pity to the paupers has actually been written into the entire trilogy. This theme was not a last-minute detour. It was intentionally forecasted in Nolan's revisions to the Goyer script of Batman Begins. Nolan's Batman is actually very soft on crimes committed by lower economic classes. Batman is not a sword bearer. Forget the fact that Batman can't carry guns. His principal problem is that he can't bear the sword. Hold the phone.
About the whole no guns thing. I'm not sure I feel as strongly about it as you do.
You just shot the bad guy with Batman's gun.
Oops.
Why can't Batman carry guns? All his vehicles have them. That bat flying thingy is definitely shooting guns. The Batmobile has missiles and a gun turret. The Batpod has 50 caliber guns, missile launchers, and even a harpoon gun. If Batman owns a pair of roller skates, I'm pretty darn sure they have guns on them. But the Batman can't carry guns. Screw it. I'm not writing this.
But I digress.
Back to the subject. Nolan's Batman will not bear the sword, the classic symbol of justice against the poor, the paupers. Not even if, like Joe Chill, they kill his parents. Without exception in this trilogy, the poor are merely desperate, not greedy, never bad. In this trilogy, the Batman handles only the three M's: mobs, madmen, and mercenaries, and pretty much in that order according to the trilogy. But if your purse gets snatched, you are crap out of luck. Better call Tim Burton's Batman to handle that. Nolan said from the beginning he wanted an altruistic Batman, not a vigilante Punisher or Charles Bronson in Death Wish. In Batman Begins, Nolan's movie is the softest portrayal of Joe Chill, the man who killed Bruce Wayne's parents, that has ever come about. Nolan rewrote Goyer's original script, which basically presented Chill as a greedy thug. In the original script, Chill shoots Thomas, angrily telling Martha, "Give me the damn pearls," just like in the original comic. So Goyer is right in line with the thuggish Joe Chill or Jack Napier of the Tim Burton 1989 movie, but Nolan depicts Chill as nervous, shaking, his gun accidentally firing. Yeah, fatally shooting by accident. Twice. Oh, whatever. I'll go into more detail on this on my next video, but every reference to pity to the paupers in Batman Begins was written into Goyer's script by the Nolans, including, but not limited to, Joe Chill's remorseful courtroom apology, Thomas Wayne's depiction of Gotham as having hard times, Rachel's car ride with Bruce where she shows him the slums and complains the mob is creating hard times and desperation, Alfred's depiction of Father Thomas Wayne fighting poverty and depression, the revision of Ra's al Ghul into a person engineering poverty and economics to combat the efforts of Thomas Wayne to save the city, and even his phrase, "create enough hunger and everyone becomes a criminal," all of it. This brings Nolan into direct conflict with the first half of The Dark Knight Rises, since it raises the problem of maximal injustice and the need of justice, the sword bearer. And that injustice is the result of the paupers, the demos, precisely the group that Nolan is in sympathy and pity with. The first half of the story is about class warfare, explicitly drawn from the Republic Book 8. Bane is the tyrannical man, the disease and death of all government. He's the embodiment of death, drawn straight from John Milton's Paradise Lost. The story is set. Gotham is a city at war with itself. Bane is sadistically aggravating that war and enjoying every moment of it, watching Gotham burn itself to ashes, just like he promised to do in the pit. Bane's principal allies are the pauper class, vengeful, unrestrained, greedy. Batman needs to return as Plato's symbolic head, lead the police and military, who are Plato's symbolic chest, to restore civil order to society's belly, principally by putting down a pauper revolt. Problem: generally, the people have turned on Batman and all government. They love Bane, who appeared above ground as their protector and liberator. I mean, look at this guy's resume. The people's champion, robbing the wicked rogues of Gotham, killing off their greedy oligarchs, undermining false idols and bureaucrats who promoted economic bondage, bringing the light of truth, and defeating those responsible for the deception, freeing the oppressed and falsely imprisoned, the equalizer in the courtroom, as the Demas sees it at least, with righteousness, liberty, and judgment for all, imprisoning the enemies of the people, suppressing injustice, repelling foreign invaders, threatening Gotham's new liberty, securing the borders of his new state, protecting the borders of that state, establishing a long-term domestic security plan for defense. It's time to break out the bubbly. So wait, is this the bad guy? At what point in the film did Bane become unpopular with these people? Popular. Ha, that's a great pun. Of course, the tyrant of the Republic at first appears as the protector of the people, or the paupers. Joe points out that this is just the honeymoon period of democracy after the oligarchs have been overthrown, but that the Demas has merely jumped out of the fear of slavery and into a worse slavery, out of the smoke and into the fire.
We started the fire.
Yes, the fire rises.
Don't kill him. I want him to feel the heat. Feel the fire of 12 million souls. You failed.
You'll just have to imagine the fire.
Your screenwriters misplaced something here. As Socrates states in this quote, the people who would escape the smoke, which is the slavery of free men, have fallen into the fire, which is the tyranny of slaves. The fire, which is the tyranny, not the fire, which is nuclear annihilation. Big spoiler. There's no nuclear bomb in the Republic of Plato. There's no nuclear bomb in Paradise Lost. The whole bomb plot in this movie was a huge departure.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I think maybe your screenwriter should have gotten rid of that bomb. After all, the problem is not the bomb Bane put in Gotham. The problem is supposed to be the bomb that was Gotham. It's the problem of a society eating itself alive through lack of restraint, the unbridled greed and lawlessness of oligarchs and Democrats, eventually giving rise to a tyrant even more unrestrained than themselves. The second half of the movie, by contrast, turns into a foreign invasion story. Everything changes for no apparent reason. The screenwriters hoped we wouldn't notice. We did. And now suddenly, by contrast, Gotham is merely a city held hostage by a terrorist. The paupers weren't violent usurpers at war. They're helpless victims. Of course, if Bane just wants to blow them up, why didn't he hurry up and do it? Bane is somehow holding 12 million people at bay with an army of only 1,200 men. Batman needs to return, get rid of the bomb, so the good pauper people of Gotham can return to life as normal. New problem? Well, none really. Just get rid of that ticking time bomb and all's well. And Bane, well, for some reason, he's suddenly unpopular in Gotham. Why? Don't know. They're still hunting police like dogs. They're trying to kill Gordon, putting oligarchical Lucius Fox and Bruce Wayne on trial to execute him, and apparently the public is suddenly on Batman's side. Oh, for the love of Gotham. When did this seismic narrative shift occur? The most unfortunate and useless character of the Dark Knight saga, in my opinion, is Captain Jones, or Captain Davy Jones, as you may recall. This guy shows up in Gotham with his other two stooges. Blake rehearses to him everything we in the audience already know. Blake explains the way the whole first half of the movie is just a distraction. Bane's just getting people to rearrange deck chairs while the ship is going down. Then Jones is promptly killed off. Why? Because if he isn't hung high, then it's going to appear that Bruce Wayne is rising up out of the pit, because of all the atrocities committed by the paupers against the wealthy in Gotham, which he is watching via TV. So Bane makes the pivotal stupid mistake of his campaign.
And hang them where the world can see.
Yeah, hang him high so it'll be on TV and Bruce Wayne will have something other than the mass execution of the wealthy by those murderous paupers to motivate him. And there you have it, folks. The abrupt segue into an entirely different movie than the first half. Hence, all the criticisms of the movie as a whole. And the fundamental culprit, again, I'm going to demonstrate it through this video. It's pity to the paupers. As I mentioned in my previous video, we got our first clue that something was going amiss when Bane, following the Republic Book 8, kills off Daggett, his father, but by contrast, the Republic explicitly states that the Demas is the true father of tyranny and the tyrant. Second, Nolan not only shifts the blame for Bane's rise to power on the oligarchs, paupers, contrary to what I just said, end up looking more virtuous in this movie than the oligarchs do. Recall, states are as the men are. In the Republic, there's a corresponding moral degradation in the state and the characteristic individuals within it. Accordingly, our characteristic democratic man or woman ought to be the vilest of these three characters. But as I've already noted, Selina Kyle, her characteristic virtue is phronesis. Democrats don't have virtue, let alone this highest one. They are unrestrained by reason, not characterized by it. If we parallel the decline of the state with the decline of persons, both oligarchs and Democrats are ruled almost exclusively by their bellies, the multi-headed hydra thereof. The hydra head which rules the Democrat is the appetite for freedom. But there's an equivocation here that allows Selina Kyle to be portrayed as a golden-hearted Robin Hood rather than a total anarchic libertine. She wants freedom in a sense, freedom from the oppressive system in her past, a clean slate. Socrates and Plato mean to say that the Democrat wants no restraint on their appetites whatsoever. The depiction of Kyle is one of a person who is neither virtuous nor greedy, just gold-hearted and desperate. To be fair, she does let her longing for freedom empower the tyrant Bane. Democrats bring tyranny in as the Republic states, but Nolan is clear that, like Joe Chill, she only acted from desperation and similarly makes her an object of pity to the paupers. And to be fair, she does cultivate vice as the Republic states. Clearly then, whenever you see paupers in a state, somewhere in that neighborhood, there are hidden away thieves and cut purses and robbers of temples and all sorts of malefactors. Remind you guys of Jen? Precisely. Furthermore, Socrates says that some of these pauper drones have money, stingers, and we may be so bold as to affirm that there are many also criminals to be found among them, i.e. the paupers, rogues who have stings and whom the authorities are careful to restrain by force. Remind anyone of Kyle? That's where the character gets drawn from. Despite all this, her vices are whitewashed. Oligarchs create need, they create desperation, and in desperation, the paupers, including Kyle, turn to the tyrant. This is a far cry from the Republic, where the paupers grow greedy for freedom and for easy money and actually create anarchy before a tyrant even shows up. And that brings me to the next point. In The Dark Knight Rises, the tyrant arises before a class overthrow. Notice, first the tyrant appears above ground, he rallies Gotham, and a class overthrow ensues. In the Republic, the tyrant can spring from no other route than as a protector of democracy. The Democrats must prevail and establish democracy over rich oligarchs first. Then we move to tyranny. At this point in the Republic, the virtueless, appetitive, libertine paupers elect a champion or figurehead who embodies the virtues of their movement, which is pretty easy because they have no virtues. Hooray, they say of their champion and representative, he's just like us, only to find out, oh crap, he really is just like us, only he's worse, because he doesn't give a rat's rear end for the good of the state or anyone but himself. For reasons I explained in the previous lecture when I discussed the souls of men, this tyrant is maximally appetitive and unrestrained, and he'll throw everyone a party where the city is theirs, and they can do as they please. None shall interfere. But eventually, the boot comes down and the people are begging to get out from under the heel of a man who doesn't merely indulge his appetites at everybody else's expense, but cultivates more and more appetites of himself, exploiting, even murdering and butchering the people in order to satisfy himself. In summary, The Dark Knight Rises will shift the storyline of the Republic. Oligarchs are bad, and they bring Bane. The poor Democrats are generally virtuous victims, and they merely get tricked by the tyrant once the oligarchs have brought him in. I'm going to divide my critique into two halves. We'll critique the first part of the movie, which Collider said was pretty good, and then critique the second half, which it said it isn't. The first half of the movie does have some serious problems. As we look at the demise of Gotham from the rule of the roguish oligarchs to the pitiable paupers and eventually to the tyrant, the story was not developed well for three central reasons. Your rogues ain't robbing, your paupers weren't poor, and your tyrant didn't do any tyrannizing. That's a pretty sloppy start. First, let's examine why the rogues ain't robbing. You notice that I'm sparing the movie any criticism for its depiction of the honor-driven democracy, because I thought it did a really good job at that. 4 stars. Peter Foley, you're still my favorite character in this movie, but the oligarchy, I'm just giving that 2. Let me highlight the good parts with another.
Wayne coming back is change. Change is either good or bad. I vote bad. On what basis? I flipped a coin.
I said no rhyme.
Come on, let's go scalping.
The sheer ugliness of the reign of oligarchs might be brief, but it is masterfully well written. Lazy stock exchangers, looking down on the shoeshine boy and throwing him chump change, walking downstairs and audibly snickering at a poor janitor. This is drawn from the Republic Book 8, where Plato writes, men of business, stooping as they walk, pretending not even to see those whom they have already ruined, insert their sting, that is their money, into someone else who is not on their guard against them to recover the parent sum many times over. As a testament to their lack of sophrosyne, that's moderation, the first cardinal virtue, here they are oogling at a pretty lady who incidentally is not Miranda Tate, as some viewers wondered. She's there to illustrate how lecherous and appetitive these guys are before they go scalping. Socrates warns against these lazy, corrupt drones. Let there be a general rule that everyone shall enter into voluntary contracts at his own risk, and there'll be less of this scandalous money-making. Republic Book 8 again. And here's my favorite part of the scene. A stock marketer complaining that he asked for no rye. This was the scene that tipped me off to the fact that the Nolan brothers have clearly been reading C.S. Lewis, particularly the Screwtape Letters. Delicacy of taste, C.S. Lewis notes, is a form of gluttony, not for quantities to feed the belly, but pickiness for the qualities for that belly. Lewis describes one such woman. She insists on having weak tea and a piece of toast no matter what food is set before her, and does not see her determination to get only what she wants as a form of gluttony. Glubos, the patient's mother demon, has done a good job of keeping her in. She thinks she is virtuous because all she wants is a piece of toast, but she is extremely particular about how it should be toasted. This particularity allows her to be controlled by her delicate stomach. You know what, folks? I bet she wanted rye as well. In short, the theme that gluttony can pertain to delicacy as well is one theme the Nolans borrowed from C.S. Lewis, and it's not accidental that both Nolans and Lewis use the particularities associated with bread to illustrate the point. And this is not the last reference for particularities with respect to food, characterizing these belly-worshipping oligarchs. At the masquerade ball, the scriptwriters depict the oligarchs as eating, quote, sumptuous food. Dang it! Sumptuous food! Again, the entire masquerade ball is a reference to the Republic Book 8, which states that the oligarchs pacify the Democrats occasionally with dribbles of charity, dribbles of honey from the drones to the lesser drones. When the people meet, they are omnipotent, but they cannot be brought together unless they are attracted by a little honey, and the rich are made to supply that honey, of which the demagogues keep the greater part to themselves, the demagogues being oligarchs with good speaking skills here, giving only a taste to the mob.
Proceeds go to the big fat spread. It's not about charity. It's about feeding the ego of whichever society hag laid this on.
Irony. The rogues are indeed wearing masks, says Socrates. They're disguised as philanthropists. And again, Selina echoes the same point. Gotham's rich oligarchs, she claims, are guilty of keeping too much of the proverbial pie for themselves and leaving too little for the rest. So why only 2 stars, you may be asking? Because the movie might have made the oligarchs, the drones with money stingers, look contemptible, but it hardly did anything to make them seem dangerous to the paupers. Where's the danger? And consequently, where's the justification for a murderous class uprising? Not so in the Republic. Socrates states that the stinger drones insert their money or sting and stick it to the poor, the foolish poor, with debt entrapment. Nolan's oligarchs are contemptible, yes, but dangerous to the poor? Hardly. In order for this aspect of the movie to have worked out, the Nolan brothers would have needed to come up with some oligarchic scheme, kind of like the Bernie Mae and Freddie Mac scandal, where unregulated real estate scammers threatened to to put tons of foolish investors on the streets. It's not hard to imagine large-scale or similar scenarios. So if the rogues ain't up to robbing the paupers, why not? The culprit, again, was actually pity to the paupers. The movie got sidetracked bad. Your scriptwriters wanted to sympathize with the paupers, but did it by identifying the protagonists of the film with the pauper class. This started as a contest between oligarchs because, as the Republic states, oligarchy arises when one, seeing another growing rich, seeks to rival him. The Nolans didn't make the oligarchs dangerous to the paupers. They made the oligarchs dangerous to another oligarch, Bruce Wayne. The screenwriters desperately wanted to identify him with the pauper class. Consequently, a pretty far-fetched account of how Bruce Wayne, one of the world's wealthiest men, suddenly has nothing. And if any of you listeners think that I can snag a set of footprints off Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos and run off with their money and leave them penniless, I got news for you. It doesn't work. I tried it twice. The irony here is that this movie is the film that would have been leftist in its sentiments, but because Nolan's made the oligarchs dangerous to a would-be pauper, Bruce Wayne, rather than to the economically oppressed public, the movie was taken to be a criticism of the Occupy Wall Street movement. There was quite an online scuffle between liberals and conservatives over this, conservatives arguing, no, this movie is a class of irrational class envy by the poor, liberals arguing, no way, those Gothamites were indeed poor and oppressed, and each trying to claim that this movie was a cultural milestone in favor of their own views. Dang it! Settle down and read some Plato, for crying out loud. Here's the real answer of what's going on. Having wasted all this time trying to identify Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne with the paupers, the Nolans merely hinted that the economic travails of both Bruce and Selina were being shared by the general public. For example, as Bruce drives up to the masquerade, a snarky photographer complains about rich stiffs. Bruce complains to Miranda that the masquerade is sham philanthropy. Selina dances with Bruce, complaining that the oligarchs don't share the wealth. And when Bruce is thrown off the board of directors due to reasons that are explicitly found in the Republic, as we saw in the last lecture, we see a crowd of people protesting for God only knows what reason outside the building. The audience is supposed to get the impression that the protesting paupers have been similarly mistreated. We didn't get that impression. This movie tried to say what it should have been showing. So, the liberals were right regarding how the movie was intended by the screenwriters to be perceived, but due to the misfire of the Nolans, which I just described and explained, conservatives were right about how the end result turned out looking. See? Everyone's happy. Now, moving on. This leads directly to the second problem. Your paupers ain't even poor, consequently not even as pitiable as the Republic depicts the pauper class, let alone how Charles Dickens would have. And for that reason, I'm giving this movie's portrayal of the democratic stage of Gotham's decline only 1 star. To illustrate, introducing again, Jen. She's apparently selling her body to keep a roof over her head, and pushed to this desperation, she's trying to rip off a yuppie and his Rolex. You go, girl! Oh, by the way, here's our other so-called pauper, Selina Kyle. She's a world-class jewel thief who can break into Bruce Wayne's safe anytime she wants to, break into John Daggett's vault anytime, bring down an entire stock exchange, and last I checked, she's the proud new owner of Bruce Wayne's Lamborghini. Which is just as well, because Batman will wreck any vehicle he drives. Seriously. He wrecked his other Lamborghini to save a bad lawyer, he wrecked his Batmobile to save a good lawyer, and then he wrecked his Batpod to save this Joker, and just when you think he has a vehicle he can't wreck, shabang, there it goes. Stay off the road and take the train. Nope, forget I said that. Just walk until he starts to break people's legs. He actually broke his own leg. Enough. Batman and transportation are not friends.
But I digress.
Back to the point. Selina, why is your little protege putting out a red light? You're starting to look a little selfish there, honey. Oh, look, here's our other pauper. He's one of the world's wealthiest billionaires, and he's going to get all his money back when the smoke clears, and last I checked, he still has a mansion full of rooms. Got a room for Jen there, Bruce? Awkward. But here comes Bane, mighty champion of the poor and economically oppressed, all of whom can apparently afford signed tickets to a Major League football game. God damn it. Look, you can't take Gotham's wealthiest man and smartest woman and make them representatives of the pauper class. It doesn't add up. I did the math. Look, money plus brains, not paupers. These are not paupers. These yokels over here, those are paupers. Shrewd jewel thief with a heart of gold, not a pauper. These unrestrained drunks, paupers. Well-behaved football fans, not paupers. Street thugs and gangsters, definitely paupers. Brainy billionaire and crime fighter, not a pauper. Paupers are the poor, virtueless rabble who think, hey, we ought to run to government. Just because they identify as poor victims who have enough sense to know that something is going wrong with the world, but they don't have the brains or virtue to fix any of it, and they really don't realize that they're actually part of the problem to begin with. Consequently, according to the Republic, they will bring tyranny, which leads to my next point. Your tyrant isn't tyrannizing. And for that reason, I give this movie's depiction of tyranny 0 stars. It just simply didn't happen. Why not? Presumably because the paupers have just taken over Gotham and they would be to blame. So, the rise of Bane culminates in a huge block party where the paupers overthrow the oligarchs and take their stuff and kill them off, and not once do we see the tyrant Bane bring the boot down on these renegade paupers and make them regret it. This brings us back to the reason why Roger Ebert and others have criticized the character of Bane as an incoherent villain. Is he the liberator of Gotham or a destroyer and annihilator of Gotham? He's not supposed to be either. He's a tyrant. Republic Book 8, a man who first appears under the auspice of liberator, but then reveals himself to be the disease of the state and consequently its destroyer, not by a nuclear bomb, incidentally. It's almost like your screenwriters went through the Republic and made a checklist. Tyrant first appears as liberator? Check. Tyranny brings the death and destruction of the state? Check. Did we forget anything? Yeah. Your tyrant is supposed to be a tyrant. You forgot that. A covert terrorist in disguise is not a tyrant. When Bane has Bruce in the pit, Bane makes all sorts of horrific promises regarding his plans to grind the city of Gotham into the ground, promises which, if he kept them, really would make it sound as if he's promising tyranny, anarchy, and the death of the city, a slow, painful death. And what does he do instead? He gives the paupers of Gotham their every wish, and they absolutely love him. As I asked previously, how is this guy supposed to suddenly become unpopular? Why? Plato's fire of tyranny is suddenly replaced with the fire of nuclear annihilation, and this creates a plot hole which ironically is as big and deep as the pit that Bruce was trapped in when this narrative sank. A narrative that takes bigger and more frequent leaps than Bruce made in order to get out of that pit. And it doesn't work. So in its depiction of tyranny, this movie gets 0 stars, and this threatens not only the narrative of the story, but the whole theme of the trilogy, the righteous man, Tao Daiku. Batman is supposed to be a portrait of justice and righteousness pitted in this movie against the maximally unjust man. But the maximally unjust man, an unrestrained tyrant lording over a state at war with itself, is not a simple terrorist bomber. No tyranny? That means no tyrant. No tyrant? No maximally unjust man. No maximally unjust man? No maximally just man with which to contrast him. Let's return to the issue of Bane and his motivation. Bane is based off John Milton's death, which, as I quoted earlier, is malicious and takes pleasure in inflicting human suffering. Ebert asks, was his motive class overthrow or nuclear annihilation and death? First, what motivates him? Bane is supposed to be a sadist, death. That was not adequately covered in this movie, though it was promised to us viewers when Bane reveals his plans to Bruce in the pit. Secondly, he is a tyrant drawn from the Republic. He is supposed to be a tyrant who knows full well the pain and agony he'll bring to Gotham precisely by destroying its civilization and its structures. Now to the full analysis, particularly of the second half, the payoff that fell short. Music. What went wrong? The answer is the background narrative. Neither tyranny nor the tyrant came to Gotham. As I explained at the beginning of this lecture, out of nowhere, a new narrative begins. The deep perennial issues of cultural and personal decay and inevitable self-destruction they bring are set aside, and the movie inexplicably turns into a popcorn superhero flick about Batman saving a city from a ticking time bomb. So, the movie is ducking its own main issue. What do you do with a civilization and souls within it in tyrannical freefall? The number one problem with this movie is it cannot address its central theme, justice. And this was supposed to be the overarching theme of the whole trilogy. This movie was to be the capstone, the maximally just man. Going back to our fresco by Raphael again, Lady Justice sits above as a harmony between the other virtues and the souls and civilizations that they are supposed to inform. But principally, she holds the sword along with the scales of justice. Raphael is not alone in this depiction. All classic art depicts Lady Justice this way. Nolan's vision of true justice is different, and this is a problem that I said goes all the way back to Batman Begins, a movie that I'm going to cover in the next lecture of this series. In the training montage of Batman Begins, Bruce is purposefully depicted as mastering the 4 cardinal virtues. But when it comes time to execute a murderer, recall, Nolan wrote this whole scene into David Goyer's original script. Bruce Wayne emphatically states he will not be an executioner. And as I said before, he cannot be the sword bearer. In fact, Nolan rewrote the battle scene between Ra's al Ghul and Batman aboard the monorail so that the Batman is not directly responsible for Ra's al Ghul's death. Notice the script explicitly states that Ra's al Ghul sees his own sword jamming the controls of the monorail and consequently sending Ra's to his own death. And that only happened thanks to the intervention of Gordon, also written into the Goyer script by Nolan for reasons that I'm going to explain in the next video. To recap, whether it's swords or guns, execution and judgment are not Batman's territory. Lady Justice is the sword bearer. This is not only a Platonic theme, it's also a Christian one. See this guy? Recognize him? What's that in his hand? Want to see a few more icons just to be sure I'm not cherry picking here? This icon, incidentally, is referred to as ha ek deketes, ha meaning the and ek out, like when you extract something, and deketes, which is from the root dikaiosine. That's our fourth cardinal virtue of justice and righteousness. When you put them together, it's the one who deals out justice. It's typically translated the Avenger. Here are some translations and other cognates of the exact same term, but it's consistent. For those keeping track, Captain America was the first Avenger. Jesus of Nazareth, he'll be the last one. And he's supposed to be coming with the sword of vengeance. In summary, Nolan's vision of justice is a far departure from both the classical conception of justice and the biblical one, and we need to ask, why so? And how did this throw the background narrative into a tailspin? Point 2, therefore, the movie suddenly got sidetracked from the principal cardinal virtue of justice onto other virtues, specifically the strictly theological virtues, especially altruism, that is love and charity. Recall that was the principal theological virtue explored in Batman Begins, and Nolan explicitly said he wanted a Batman with altruistic motives. But the sword bearer brings vengeance. He avenges, whether or not the matter is a personal one. For those of you who watched my last video, you recall that Nolan is purposefully and explicitly covering all 7 heavenly virtues, including the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, or altruism. If you weren't convinced, consider how charity prevails over avenging justice in this movie as a theme. Batman keeps his faith and trust in people, especially paupers, and this theme prevails over justice to nearly a pathological extent. Want to see? That band of murdering prisoners in the pit who killed Talia's mother and tried to rape little Talia as a child, batch of murdering pedophiles, you can die in that pit for all I care. Well, Bruce Wayne is going to set them all free. Merry Christmas. Pity to the paupers. Remember those angry Gothamites who are trying to kill Lucius Fox because he's an oligarch and kill Gordon? Well, they're off scot-free too, because pity to the paupers. Merry Christmas. And they're also trying to kill Bruce Wayne because he's an oligarch and Batman because he was Gordon's accomplice. And guess what? Batman's going to light up a signal in the sky and let those 12 million murderers know he's back in town. Merry Christmas, paupers. Remember the jewel thief who got Batman's back broken? Well, he's going to give her a vehicle, military-grade weapons, and a clean slate to leave the town and screw up all his battle plans. Because there's no chance a woman would ever stab the Batman in the back, right?
She's hot. I trust her.
And all those murdering Gothamites who started this mess, we're just going to have them gather around a statue of Batman and sing Kumbaya. No hard feelings. Merry Christmas! To recap, murdering, raping paupers in Bane's pit, thieving, betraying pauper Kyle, insurrectionists, and lynching mobs, all off the hook. Seriously, this is pity to the paupers pushed to the point of pathology. Much like my talent for alliteration. And Batman keeps hope, no matter what.
Gotham is beyond saving, must be allowed to die.
Batman hopes all of Gotham will be spared judgment and destruction. It's universal redemption in the end. Ra's al Ghul had a point. Something in Gotham needs to die for this movie to end right. But according to Plato, the tyrant didn't simply arise due to the decadence of the rich, but to the even more decadent libertinism of the poor. The problem is not the bomb that Bane brought to Gotham. It's the bomb that is a portion of Gotham. Batman is going to need to put his tender theological virtues aside and exercise wise judgment, wisdom, the third cardinal virtue. It's necessary and central in order to have true justice. No sentimentality, no more Christmas gifts to the murderous paupers. Regarding the sword of judgment, the Batman has to be a divisive figure. The righteous or maximally just man will always be a divisive figure, folks, in some sense a sword bearer. True, justice is about harmony, but unity is not the same thing as harmony. Batman cannot unite everything and everyone in the city, the likes of which Plato describes in its final stages of cultural decay. Remember the story of how Satan fell and took a third of the angels with him? I told that story a couple lectures back. Did you see this icon of Jesus separating the good and bad people from each other at final judgment? Do you recall that even the wise Socrates was executed by a majority of Athenian citizens, but left a righteous legacy in a small remnant, among whom was Plato? You can't save everything and everyone. If Socrates couldn't do it in Athens, and Jesus couldn't do it in Jerusalem, nor will he do it at the final judgment, and if God the Father couldn't do it in heaven before the creation of the world with the angels, then I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Batman can't do it. The righteous man is the avenger. He holds the swords, and he's divisive. And Batman has a lot of avenging to do. Gotham needs to be held in the balance, as held to account, because Gotham, you got a lot of splaining to do for crimes including, but not limited to, trespassing, breaking and entering, vandalism, rioting, looting and rioting, kidnapping, armed assault, unarmed assault, multiple accounts thereof, illegal detainment, burglary, insurrection, sedition, treason, terrorism, accomplice to murder at least, probably murder in the first and second degree aggravated by intent to cause psychological harm. You know why these people are hugging at the end of the movie? It's probably because they're going to jail. Yeah, Gotham, you got some splaining to do. But on the other hand, those rich oligarchs in Gotham had their fair share of crimes too, including, but not limited to, getting the rich shoeshine, looking down on the poor and sneering, oogling at pretty women. Actually, I kind of do that too. Scalping stocks, complaining that their DoorDash orders weren't right, not sharing enough of the proverbial pie, and eating sumptuous food. Dang it again, sumptuous food.
Kill him. Kill them all.
So when you take everything into account, it's pretty even. Oh, who am I kidding? That makes no sense whatsoever. What does wise judgment and the wise bringing of justice by the Avenger look like? On to my next criticism of the movie. In this movie, it has to be said, prudence and wisdom definitely take the hindmost in establishing justice. Going back to our Platonic model for society, there's always going to be three classes, the lowest of which, that is the mercantile, will eventually be split into two increasingly separated classes of rich and poor unless good education and good politics can keep that from happening. But in the end, the real division is not between the rich and the poor or the mercantile class in general versus the auxiliaries. It's between the virtuous persons and the virtueless. As The Dark Knight depicts, there are good and bad persons in each one of these classes. The problem is the spiritual and internal decay within the individuals who simply refuse to obey any rational restraint in themselves. Those persons cannot be part of a united and harmonious society because they have no internal integrity within themselves. They exist in the state like a plank of rotten wood in a boat, ready to spread their rot and sink the ship of state. The wise and righteous judge bears the sword, separating the good and the bad, and he unites the good that can remain. He can't unite everything and everyone. Ever tried to nail Jell-O to a wall? Yeah, it'd be kinda like that. But there is precious little prudence or wisdom being exercised by the Batman in the second half of this movie. Quite the opposite. Which is surprising how well the previous movie did at handling this virtue in this topic. But now love, faith, and hope in the people paupers specifically has supplanted wisdom entirely. To recap, murdering, raping paupers in Bane's pit, thieving, betraying Pauper Kyle, insurrectionist, lyncher, mobs, all off the hooks. God damn it, is there any phronesis or wisdom going on in this movie about justice?
Your precious armory, gratefully accepted.
Your discarded orphans with which to build a mercenary army, gratefully accepted. Your confession letter with which to start a class war, gratefully accepted. Your nuclear reactor to turn into a bomb, gratefully accepted. Your spinal column as you walk barehanded into my machine gun nest, gratefully... Oh, for the love of Gotham, get it together, or I'm going to start rooting for Bane. But wait, weren't all the virtues defined by Plato with respect to wisdom and prudent judgment, including the other cardinal virtues of courage and moderation? Yeah, that's my next criticism. Is this really the wise endurance of the soul, or rational restraint of any sort on Batman's part? Batman's fortitude and moderation are anything but wise in the second half of this movie. Regarding fortitude and the wise endurance of the soul, Batman returns to Gotham and lights a fire in the sky so 12 million people who are hunting police like dogs will know he's back in town. Not wise, but he trusts them, and he decides to let Catwoman be in charge of liberating the police. Not wise, not wise. And once he gets rid of the bomb, won't that just permit the murderous paupers to go back to their killing and looting spree? Yeah, they're going to think Batman died saving them, and they'll all be inspired to do good. Oh, wait, they love that bomb. That's the instrument of their liberation. It's keeping the military at bay so the paupers can have their looting and murdering festival.
This bomb is armed. This bomb is mobile. And the identity of the triggerman is a mystery. For one of you holds the detonator.
Come back with that, Batman. Die, you bastard. Batman's lack of soprocity, the first and fundamental cardinal virtue of rational restraint. This movie is the most damaging of all. Recall that in the movie's theme is justice, and for Plato, justice is closely associated with the cardinal virtue soprocity. In fact, Bane was depicted as attacking justice precisely by attacking from below. He first unleashes all immoderation in Gotham by stirring up class warfare driven by a love for money and freedom. Similarly, as I showed in the last lecture, like Plato's tyrant, love is his master. It is a love unconstrained by wise or rational judgment. Love for Talia capitulated, I said, into indulgence, and this love took the place of wise judgment in him. Sadly, I can't say much better for the Batman in the second half of this movie. Wisdom has been replaced. Love is his master too, and it is not a wisely governed or wisely restrained love. Rather, it's love or altruism for the people, the paupers in particular. It's thrown reason to the wind at every available opportunity. Again, pity to the paupers. To turn a phrase from Plato, pity is now Batman's tyrant and lords over him, driving him to every reckless deed. The Batman, it can be argued, did not emerge in this movie as the maximally righteous man, but rather another version of an unwise and consequently a really unrighteous one, or at least not a very righteous one.
Let's start summarizing. By trying to amalgamate two different tales of two cities, the Republic Book 8, which is damning to the Demas, and pity to the paupers expressed in Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, your script authors sent their background narrative into a tailspin, and as a direct result, Bane never emerges as the tyrant of the Republic Book 8, no maximally unjust man, and never requires a maximally just man to oppose him, so Batman instead becomes something other than the maximally just man. Bane never emerged as the tyrant, and tyranny never came to Gotham, so Batman never has to become the sword-bearer, ha ektaketes, the avenger, the sword-bearer. In order to cover the fourth cardinal virtue, this movie needed to give us the maximally unjust man versus the maximally just man. Instead, the second half ended with the covert terrorist versus the piteous man. Pity to the paupers. And he is ridiculously imprudent, which leads to the question, is there any real difference regarding justice within the soul of Bane, which allowed love instead to become his tyrant and turned him into a monster for the sake of love of Talia, and Batman, whose love, that is pity for the city of Gotham and its paupers, led him to every reckless act imaginable. In terms of its depiction of justice within the souls of men, this movie fell short, period. And now you guys know the reasons. But it's still one of my favorite movie trilogies of all time. You guys know that. Why else would I be doing these videos? The amalgamation of Plato's Republic to John Milton's poem is downright brilliant, and this movie should have finished better if it had stuck to its original source material. But as they say, shoot for the stars, you just might hit the moon. On the other hand, the moon is still the classic symbol for lunacy, isn't it? And this movie got a little bit crazy in its final act. Let's end this critique on a high note. You guys remember that I promised to give you no less than 70 nameplays by the end of this series? Well, you're still counting, right? Here's another one. On the side of the cement trucks, which Blake discovers to be placing explosives into the foundations of Gotham, you see the word broquette. These cement trucks were actually borrowed for the movie from Frank Bryant Construction Company of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The alternative name, broquette, was chosen by the Nolans. It's a word of Swedish origin meaning lightning bug or little lightning bug, but more importantly, it's a term of endearment given to little children. Broquette figuratively means dear little one. These construction workers are formerly abandoned orphans, the dear little children of Gotham abandoned. What Nolan's saying is that the youth are the foundations of society. They lay the bedrock, and they can make it crumble as well. This lesson is frequently found among the ancient philosophers. When society abandons its youth, it abandons its foundations, and they crumble. The foundations of society are the education of the youth, and the bottom will fall out. The foundations will crack beneath you like ice cracking beneath one's feet. You remember that Bane is attacking society from below, correct? You see the ice cracks in the symbols for the movie? Do you see the ice cracking in the original theatrical trailer?
I knew Harvey Dent. I was his friend.
Do you see ice cracking beneath the feet of the oligarchs forced into exile? These are all symbolic. Society, given over to greed and immoderation, has abandoned its youth and its foundations, and consequently, society has lost its footing. Do you see Bruce Wayne is hobbling around on a cane? That doesn't make much sense, does it? He seemed perfectly fine at the end of the last movie, but it's symbolic here, people. The point is, he, like the city that he represents, is losing his footing. All of this symbolism of foundations, ice cracking beneath one's feet, losing one's footing, it all goes back to Batman Begins. Remember, I demonstrated in Batman's training montage that at first he is in danger of losing his footing for a killing stroke. That's symbolic of the virtue of sophrosyne, moderation, the first cardinal virtue. The vision of Bruce falling through the ice here is exactly the same imagery as that of the Gothamites falling through the ice in the third movie. That was not accidental. Notice also, according to the side of this truck, this company was established in 1883. That's the exact same year that the People's Edition of the Complete Works of Charles Dickens was published. Is that a coincidence? Well, actually, yeah, it is. Frank Bryant Construction Company actually was established in 1883. But it's still one heck of a coincidence, isn't it? Okay, back to the point. Moderation. It is the first cardinal virtue, and it is closely connected in Plato's thought to the final virtue of justice. You lose your foundation, you're going to lose all the virtues and justice with it. The Nolan brothers took David Goyer's vision of Bruce falling through the ice and made it their working metaphor for losing one's foundations, the first cardinal virtue, that is, sophrosine. It's the foundational virtue upon which all the others rest, and the first virtue which our souls gain in order to gain their footing. Well done, Nolan brothers. Well done. I like your symbolism there. And that makes a perfect segue into our next discussion, which will cover the first two cardinal virtues, starting with sophrosine, that is moderation, and the second cardinal virtue of Andrea, that is fortitude and courage, once more as we cover Batman Begins. That is, he begins to develop virtue. It's coming up here next, here at the Batman Code.